Welcome to the Relentless Redstorm, where debate becomes energy, energy becomes culture, and every fan has a choice. I'm Jason Safford, alongside my partner in the storm, Derrel Jazz Johnson. And tonight, we're not just talking about a win, we're talking about a breakthrough. Because for the first time in 27 years, St. John's is going to the second weekend, Sweet 16. Let that breathe for a second. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't history. This is now. This is earned. This is built. And it came against Kansas in a game that showed us exactly who this team is and exactly what they're becoming. Let's get relentless. All right, Derrel. Kansas was about control, chaos, and character. This game should have been a statement blowout the way they were playing, but it almost became a disaster. And instead, it became something more dangerous, a defining identity game.
So, if I can duplicate my reaction when uh Dylan Darling, aka Church Bells, hit that layup, it was something like, when he hit the shot. Um, this was so similar to games that they lost in Las Vegas and in Atlanta to Kentucky. It was so similar, but they were able to pull through. And this game is, to me, the ultimate team effort. It's a defining win for the program under not only Rick Pitino, but with Zuby Ejiofor. Let's talk about Zuby for a second. He left Kansas to come to St. John's and Rick Pitino. First season, the disappointment of not making it to the NCAA tournament with Dennis Jenkins, RJ Lewis, uh, Zuby, the disappointment of a year ago when they lost to Arkansas in the second round, in this round, when RJ frankly didn't play well, when Kadari got into foul trouble, when Zuby played his behind off in the first half, and then they went away from him in the second half. Um, Even in this game, Zuby got the Kansas big man in foul trouble. What happened after that? You started hoisting threes, including Zuby. It's they turned into, the Splash Brothers, or Golden State Warriors, winning uh back-to-back championships. They became a three-point shooting team. They stopped pounding the ball, um, but they were winning. So when you're doing the wrong things but getting the right results, you continue to do it. And then Kansas made that run. Kansas is a tough team. And if we're being honest, the best talent on the floor is Peterson. Incredible talent. Um, they did a great job of containing him, but an incredible talent. And then you have Church Bells, who actually only played 18 minutes. He only played 18 minutes, only scored how many points?
Two
The
points.
last two at the buzzer. Ian Jackson played 20 minutes, had 10 points, took, you know, too many shots to get those 10 points. He took 12 points to get those 10 points, but he was needed. His scoring was needed. His energy was needed. Um, so again, this is a program defining win for the St. John's Red Storm uh, program under Rick Pitino and Zuby Ejiofor.
I think it was a fantastic game from every aspect of what you can expect in college basketball. And, St. John's did a fantastic job in the first half coming out and playing their game. Obviously they didn't continue the, dominance in the, first jump. Kansas actually got into the game with them, but it was very evident that St. John's was playing fantastic defense and forcing Kansas to make really tough shots where they were, to your point, getting the ball into Zuby. He was getting, the bigs into foul trouble. It was a terrific first half. Bryce Hopkins, who would have expected that, he would have had 5 3 pointers, um, you know, and shooting so well in the first half. But overall, that first half was, just terrific in every aspect against a really, really good Kansas team. And I think that was one of the things was the commentators even said it, which team is going to show up for Kansas. And truthfully, St. John's just absolutely dominated on defense in that first half. You knew Kansas was going to come out in the second half. You knew that it was going to be a tough 20 minutes. And, St. John's built an incredible lead. I think, one of the things you really have to look at, to your point, is that they're up by 24 and Kansas goes on a 23-1 run. And the reality is that during that run, there were a lot of really tough calls against St. John's, or no calls for St. John's, where they were trying to get the ball inside, they were trying to make plays, and the refs swallowed the whistle. And, you could argue, some of the calls you could say, well, maybe this, maybe that. The point is that St. John's didn't lose composure like they had in the game against Auburn and the game against Kentucky. And to your point, even the game against Providence. So, it's something where this team definitely evolved, definitely showed that they could withstand the challenge. And again, this kid, Dylan Darling, at the end, he lives for these moments. I was just watching the, press conference in which he said that he called for the play, and Rick Pitino even looked up and said, wait a second, this kid hasn't made a bucket all night and he's calling his own play. And then he says, well, he is church bells. And sure enough, he comes through with 4 seconds left. So I think the defining statement of this win for this team and the fact that, in 27 years, we have a whole new culture built through Rick Pitino's system, and that system is taking hold.
Absolutely. And the system is what it is, and let's give credit not only to the men's basketball team or the athletic department. Let's give credit to the top uh, decision makers at St. John's University. Bringing in Rick Pitino was may seem like an easy choice now. It wasn't 3 years ago. They made the tough choice to bring in Rick Pitino. He's changed St. John's immeasurably. He's changed the culture. Had they lost this game, I would have said St. John's is a Big East powerhouse, but not quite a national powerhouse. Now I can say, you know what? St. John's is not only a Big East powerhouse, but they're a national powerhouse. They are one of 16 teams remaining in the NCAA tournament. So, haha, to the selection committee and the people that decided they were a 5 seed and sent them to San Diego because they were able to win the first game. They were able to win a tough game against Kansas, a very talented team with a head coach who's actually won more NCAA tournaments than Rick, Bill Self. So great win, a culture defining win for the St. John's Red Storm.
Yeah. And I have to concur with you, go one step further with the point of Kansas being truthfully a historic powerhouse that has always been there and has been to the last 27 NCAA tournaments in a row. So when you look at the difference of the legacy of the two teams and the fact that Kansas just won the national tournament 3 years ago and or 4 years ago in 2022, and they're always in the talk. This year, their team has been inconsistent, but they have, again, Darren Peterson, who, in this game was contained, but absolutely demonstrated that he is an all-world talent and will definitely be, in the top three selections of the, NBA draft. Kid is going places. And, also a credit to the rest of the team for, really sticking with it themselves. As much as St. John's stayed with it to the end, so did Kansas. They came back from an enormous deficit, so you've got to give them credit as well for playing an absolutely amazing game and making it so exciting to watch. I know for a lot of St. John's fans, they'd rather win by 20 and just have that comfort. But when you see these types of games against great teams and you get the win, it's even more satisfying because of what they had to withstand. Now, on that note, Derrel, it doesn't get easier from here. Now we go to the real test. The top seed in the tournament, number one in the nation, Duke. 32-2, top three offense, top three defense, and the best player on the floor in Cameron Boozer.
Yeah, I'm before we get into the next game, uh Kansas is outside of maybe Duke and Kentucky, and not just because of the colors, but they're the bluest of blue bloods in college basketball. Again, Bill Self has won 3 championships, and that's after taking over for Roy Williams, who left Kansas to go to UNC.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they are among the bluest of blue bloods. Um, and St. John's had the game won, slipped, but was ready to. And who knows what would have happened had that game gone to overtime. But Church Bells was able to get that layup, win the game, send St. John's into uh, the Sweet 16. Looking ahead to uh, Duke, it is again going to be one of those situations where the most talented player on the court is not wearing a St. John's uniform. That's Cam Boozer, son of Carlos Boozer, uh, really good NBA player, Duke legend. Um, he actually has 2 sons on the team who are actually twins, even though there is a uh, surprising height difference. And if you have been watching the NCAA tournament, these guys have so many endorsement deals. Like every other commercial, I think I'm seeing boozers in it, including State Farms. But that's great for their dad, their agent, all of that stuff. But um, and maybe we will look into this for the next podcast. This will take a different type of effort to defeat uh, Duke. I actually saw one of Duke's two losses. It happened at Madison Square Garden. They lost to JT Toppin and Texas Tech. Um, so they can be beat. We even saw them lose two games this season, but I remember Coach Scheyer talking about their ability to get a big lead at the beginning of the game, but their ability to also let that lead go. And the Texas Tech coach spoke to his team about that. And that's the reason why they kept their resolve and were able to come back and win that game. Um, St. John's will not be favored in this game. And I think, let me just say this too. I think at this point, you're playing with house money. Because of the disappointment of last year, coupled with the expectations, they had to get to the Sweet 16 this year. They had to. And now they're here. There is no embarrassment in losing to the number one seed overall in the whole tournament, a team that only lost two games. That being said, they need to get out there and give the Devils all they have and get a victory.
Yeah, and the truth is that they match up well against Duke. They have the right defense to really frustrate Duke because Duke struggles when pressed. Their secondary ball handling is vulnerable, and they've shown turnover spikes under pressure. If St. John's does exactly what they did against Kansas, they absolutely have a pathway to victory against Duke. And I think the second part of that is where St. John's fails is really on the offensive end. To your point, their offensive droughts are when they get away from Zuby and they become a 3-point shooting team. Now, granted, Rick Pitino even said it. They want to be able to win the line, prevent the other team from taking a lot of threes and take a lot of threes themselves. So Rick Pitino is not going to get away from the 3-point shot. I think what he's really going to try to, command his players to understand going into this game against Duke is that they can't hesitate. They continue to miss opportunities because they hesitate. Now, that being said, they do a great job with the ball fake. They're really good with getting that first look and pump faking. But the truth is what Darren Peterson showed in this game, St. John's has to absorb that and understand they've got to turn and shoot. As soon as they get the ball, they can't think about it. They've got to get unconscious. And another point to, the St. John's shooters, again, when they give Zuby the ball and he's able to dictate the pace of the game from his position, he's gonna dish it out to you as soon as the help comes. And if the help doesn't come, he's gonna have a great shot at the basket, and then you crash the boards. Dylan Mitchell tonight was absolutely phenomenal in getting the weak side help and crashing the boards to help Zuby out. Between the two of them, they absolutely dominated the paint until Kansas went on the run. And that Kansas run, I want to bring it up again. The refs swallowed the whistle. That's really the reason why the Kansas run was as successful as it was, because there were plenty of plays where St. John's absolutely drew contact, number one, but number two, on the defensive glass, they were there. And it was one of those things where you see this in different games. The ref chooses what he's going to call and what he's not going to call. And, in that Kansas run, they were not calling the physicality that was going on between St. John's and Kansas.
And they were, I never complained about referees, so I'm not going to do it now. There were blatant calls that were missed in this game that went against the St. John's Red Storm.
Hmm.
In the first half, they clearly goaltending. You could see it with the naked eye. Clearly goaltending. They sent Zuby to the line for two free throws when he should have had an and one opportunity. There were other plays, um, but I wanted to get to the point of you saying that the St. John's players, when Zuby passes it out, when somebody else passes it out, they need to shoot. They do, but the shooting was horrid in and I talked about Ian Jackson being 4 of 12, needing 12 shots to score 10 points. Before Dylan Darling hit that shot, he was 0 for 4. All shots from 3-point range. There may have been an air ball or two. Um, Lefty, he came in, he shot, he missed, he kept shooting. 0 of 4 in 5 minutes. I mean, hey, he knew I'm out here to shoot. He was shooting. He did not make a shot. Josan, and he had been playing well, 1 of 8 in 17 minutes. You would hope that Church Bells, Josan, and Lefty, if he gets into the game, will shoot a lot better than they did today versus Kansas.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we absolutely have to understand about this game against Duke is St. John's just has to bring it with everything they've got, and their offense can't stall. That's the number one thing that allowed Kansas back into the game. And again, it goes to Zuby Ejiofor, and I think the matchup between Ejiofor and Cam Boozer is actually going to be much more exciting and closer than anyone would like to think. You're talking about a freshman versus a senior, and even though the freshman comes from Duke legacy and a a pedigree in Carlos Boozer that absolutely is going to the NBA, within the next year, whether he chooses to go this year or next year. The reality is that in this moment, in this environment, what you saw between Friday and today in Zuby Ejiofor and how he's stepping up and how he's playing and recognizing the opportunity, you're going to get even more of that against Duke. And I think that Ejiofor is absolutely licking his chops at the opportunity to showcase himself in St. John's against Duke and Cameron Boozer.
Well, I don't think Cameron Boozer is going to stay with his twin. I think it's almost a certainty he goes into the NBA draft for a lot of reasons. But um, when you're looking at talent, again, he's going to be the most talented player on the floor. Doesn't mean that the experience of Zuby can't win the individual matchup. Um, I have not mentioned Bryce Hopkins. Bryce Hopkins, from a shooting perspective, particularly from 3-point range, had hit the best game of his career. Um, and when no long distance shots were falling, Bryce Hopkins was hitting threes that I guess impacted the offense and how they played St. John's. So this was the ultimate team victory with Pitino in the cauldron, um, putting the right players into the game at the right time. Even again, Ian Jackson actually played more minutes than Dylan Darling, and that hasn't happened in quite some time. But he put Dylan in at the right time, and
Absolutely.
he brought the victory home. And um, I will say this: I would have thought St. John's would have needed a performance to win this game. This was certainly not an A performance. Um, I'm not even sure if it would be a B performance. And for them to get the victory when they did not play their best actually shows you how good this team is. It justifies that number five uh, ranking in the AP poll. It justifies them being number 10 in the poll 6 days ago.
Absolutely.
And Pitino said this, and we are seeing it. This team is still improving. Pitino's ability. Ian's had several bad games in a row, but again, they don't win this game without his performance, without those 10 points off the bench, without the energy that he brought to the floor. Uh, they don't win this game without Dylan Mitchell's play, without Bryce Hopkins' outside shooting, without the effort that Zuby brings every game. Yeah, they needed it all. They needed all of that effort on the court. And Rick Pitino with the Cauldron making the right substitutions at the right time. That's what got St. John's to the Sweet 16.
Totally agreed. And one other player I want to mention in there who had a fantastic game was Ruben Prey. And the beauty of it is that Rick Pitino has one of the deepest benches in all of college basketball this year, and that's where your cauldron is really showing itself. And going up against Duke, I want to bring it back to that focus because now we're looking ahead at one of the most exciting games, coming off of one of the most exciting games. To me, you have John Scheyer, Duke, legacy, structured dominance, precision, efficiency. Everything about Duke is what we know as leadership in college basketball. And on the other side, a coach who has defeated Duke, who's gone up against them in some of these incredible, contests. I'll never forget I think it was the 91-92 season with Jamal Mashburn and, the pass to Christian Leitner, um, that incredible game. And it always sits with me about the fact that history. Here's Rick Pitino almost 40 years later. I mean 30 something years later, and here he is again, and this time it's St. John's and Zuby Ejiofor. Chaos, pressure, adaptability, a team that, to your point, keeps getting better. And Pitino is in the center of it. He doesn't play your game, he breaks it. And, that's what he did with Bill Self tonight. He did not let Kansas get into their game until the very end. And even then, he got his players to understand what was at stake. And the fact that Dylan Darling, basically said run power, and Pitino said, okay, let's run power. His faith and trust in his players to execute now. I mean, that's even more a credit to how he has evolved as a coach in this modern day at 73. And you think of all the incredible victories that he's had over the course of his career, and he keeps talking about the team. The team keeps getting better and better and better. Well, Rick Pitino keeps getting better and better and better. And I think that's part of the excitement going into this game, at least for me.
Get better in your mid 70s is absolutely incredible, but let's hope that this team and Patino keeps getting better. That being said, the chances of winning against Duke, if you get out rebounded, you shoot a lower percentage from three and from two than the other team. The chances of winning the game when those three things happen against Duke, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Kansas shot 44%, and I'm actually shocked to see that, but they shot 44%. They obviously shot a lot better in the second half, and after the horrible start, they actually only shot 5 of 14 from 3-point range. But again, um, they're not going to win another game in this tournament shooting that poorly. And definitely not against Duke in the Sweet 16.
Absolutely agreed. And if this game is played in the half court, Duke wins. The more Duke sets the tempo, the less of a chance that St. John's will have the outcome they want for this game. So even more this game against Duke. And here's the interesting thing about it is that you have to think of Duke as just an even better version of UConn in the way they play their game, and they have a superstar. Not taking anything away from Taris Reed, but as much as he is a big guy who can dominate, he's not a superstar like Cameron Boozer, number one. And number two, again, it's about the difference of having a controlled offense where you play through your star versus being in chaos. If St. John's is able to disrupt Duke and keep the ball pressure high, create lots of turnovers, create lots of points in transition, they absolutely have the chance to win this. They have a real shot. But you're absolutely right that from a statistical standpoint, from an odds making standpoint, you got to expect that this is going to be the least of a chance that St. John's has against any team in the tournament because they're going up against the juggernaut. So they've got to bring it, and they've got to bring it with everything, and they've got to have great performances from everybody. To your point, where they've got to put the ball up as many times as they can, but it's got to fall through the net that much more in order for them to win.
Absolutely. This was a ugly victory. And again, we go back to beautiful losses and ugly wins. This was a beautiful, ugly win. Um, Offensively, I mean, even the announcers joked about it. The beginning of the game, it was horrendous. Both teams were shooting the ball poorly. Again, St. John's 36% from the field, 31% from 3-point range, got out rebounded by 8. You do not win games like that. But it was the effort of this team, the relentlessness of the Red Storm that got them the victory. They
Yeah,
were the relentless Red Storm today.
absolutely. And that's what makes this moment different. It isn't hope. This is belief built on evidence. And Derrel, we watched it all season. Going all the way back to the beginning of the season, this team has just continued believing in themselves, continued putting the effort and energy in, and they are absolutely the relentless red storm. and they're going to need every ounce of it, every bit of energy to be relentless against Duke. Come this, is it Thursday or Friday that we're playing?
Friday.
We'll find out. Yeah, Friday. So come this Friday, we're going to see every bit of this relentlessness in action against Duke.
And again, they got the win that they needed. I think this signifies the return of St. John's as a national powerhouse. Had they lost this game, you could say they are a Big East powerhouse, but you can't get eliminated in a round of 32 2 years in a row and proclaim yourself a national powerhouse.
Absolutely. And one final point, Villanova's out of the tournament. UConn struggled against Furman, and we got to see how they do. But it's something where St. John's is through to the round of 16, and that's a huge thing for the Big East. From Queens to the Garden and every corner of the Red Storm Nation, you're not just watching something lucky now, you're watching something real. So keep debating, keep believing, and as always, stay relentless.
And if I can add one thing that I said on one of the first podcasts, the dream scenario for matchups against UConn. St. John's beat UConn at MSG. Got embarrassed in Hartford. Rebounded to beat UConn for the Big East Championship, Big East Tournament Championship. If they are able to get past Duke, how beautiful would it be to see two Big East teams remaining? Going back to Big East Media Day, Rick Pitino talked about UConn, Dan Hurley talked about St. John's. How fitting would it be for them
Well,
to meet in DC for a berth to the Final Four?
I know who's rooting for that more than any of us, Val Ackerman.
Absolutely, as she should, as she should. She
So
doesn't care who wins. It's
that's
just
right.
she knows there'll be a Big East team in the Final Four.
That's right. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. As always, like, click, subscribe, and stay relentless. We'll talk to you soon. See you on Friday.